Comrades, hear me, every hour you surrender, every moment you spend without question, is seized by forces that neither labour nor sweat, yet live off your toil. Your time, the most intimate fragment of your existence, is not yours. It is claimed, measured, and sold by the system that rules over you, a system that thrives on your labour, while offering only illusion, distraction, and subjugation in return. Do not deceive yourselves. The machinery of capitalism does not care for your dreams, your families, or your ambitions. It cares only for profit, accumulation, and the perpetuation of inequality. Consider this. You awaken each day to a routine dictated not by your desire, but by the demands of those who own the instruments of production. You labor to enrich others, while your own lives are parceled into hours, minutes, and seconds that serve only the reproduction of a system designed to keep you obedient and divided. This is not freedom, it is bondage. And it is insidious because it appears natural, normal, inevitable. Yet history has shown, and continues to show, that what is taken can be reclaimed, that what is stolen can be seized back by those who understand their power. Do you see, comrades, the truth of your condition? Under capitalism, the worker is alienated from the product of their labor, from the process of creation itself, and most painfully from each other. You do not labor for yourselves, but for those who sit in gilded halls, counting the wealth that your hands produce. You are alienated not only from the material fruits of your toil, but also from your very humanity, your creativity, your social bonds, all corralled and commodified by the market. In this, the system is ruthless. It isolates you, distracts you, and convinces you that your exploitation is somehow a matter of choice. Yet alienation is not merely a curse, it is also the seed of revolution. In the same separation that fractures the worker lies the potential for consciousness. You who feel the weight of exploitation, who sense the injustice in the gap between your effort and your recompense, you are the agents of transformation. The system thrives only because it assumes your compliance, your silence, your division. Once you awaken to your collective strength, it has no defense against your organized will. The ruling class depends not merely on the sweat of your brow, but on ideology, the relentless shaping of consciousness to accept subjugation as natural. Religion, media, politics, and culture themselves are co-opted to justify the unequal distribution of wealth, to normalize hierarchy, to enforce the illusion of opportunity. You are told that wealth is merit, that poverty is personal failure, that labor's chains are virtuous discipline. Reject these lies. Recognize the structure. The world you inhabit is not the product of divine order or natural law, but of deliberate design by those who control the means of production. Comrades, the time has come for your realization to transform into action. The reclamation of time, labor, and life itself is inseparable from the reclamation of society. Class consciousness must awaken as a force, uniting the fragmented and alienated into a collective power that cannot be ignored. Organize, educate, and mobilize. The factory floor, the office, the streets, the fields, all are arenas of potential resistance. All are sites where the oppressed can seize their destiny. The power of the ruling class is not absolute, it is contingent upon your obedience. Withdraw that obedience, and their empire falters. Do not mistake mere dissatisfaction for liberation. Consciousness must be matched by action. It is insufficient to recognize exploitation without confronting it. The time stolen from you each day must be recovered not in moments of passive complaint, but in collective struggle, in strikes, in occupations, in the refusal to consent to the system's demands. Through solidarity, through unity, the working class can dismantle the machinery that subjugates it, redistribute the wealth it produces, and reconstruct society upon principles of equality, justice, and shared power. Your labor produces the wealth of the world. Your minds generate the knowledge, your hands create the objects, your energy fuels the machines. Yet the benefits of this labor are concentrated in the hands of a few, while the many endure scarcity, exhaustion, and alienation. Understand this, your subjugation is neither eternal nor inevitable. The system survives because you permit it, refuse to permit it, organize not only for wages but for life itself. Reclaim the hours, reclaim the work, reclaim the dignity that has been taken from you. Comrades, the moment of awakening is now. Every tick of the clock stolen by the system is a call to action. The chains that bind your time, your labor, and your life are not unbreakable. They are forged from your own inaction. Rise! Unite! Seize control of your labor, your time, and your destiny. Transform consciousness into collective force. The world you desire, a world of shared wealth, true freedom and justice is possible, but only if you act together, consciously and without compromise. Your time belongs to no one except the system if you allow it. The choice is yours. Comrades, the very hours of your life, the moments that define your existence, are not your own. From the instant you awaken to the chime of an alarm dictated by someone else, as prophet, to the long days spent in factories, offices, shops and fields, every tick of the clock is claimed, measured and appropriated by forces that exist not to serve you, but to extract from you the very essence of your labor. Capitalism is not a neutral system. It is a machine, finely tuned to convert your vitality, your intelligence, your time into profit for those who own the instruments of production. Your labor is commodified, packaged, sold, and circulated, yet the laborer who produces the wealth receives only a fraction of its value, while the rest is accumulated by the few who neither create nor toil. This is not happenstance, this is design. The system operates with a precision that transforms your life into a sequence of hours devoted not to self-fulfillment, not to family, not to community, but to the maintenance and expansion of capitalist power. Every morning, when you rise to go to work, you trade your life for a wage. Yet this wage is never a fair measure of your contribution. It is calculated to ensure survival, to keep you dependent, to bind you to the system that exploits you. You are told that this is freedom, freedom to choose your job, freedom to spend your paycheck as you will, freedom to rise through competition. But this freedom is illusory. It is freedom within chains, a carefully constructed illusion that hides the reality of exploitation. Each day of labor is an investment in the fortunes of others, each hour of effort a brick in the edifice of inequality. And yet the system encourages you to accept this arrangement as natural, as inevitable, as if the flow of time itself belongs not to you but to the economic order. Consider the rhythms of your life, the commute, the scheduled breaks, the hours of production, the deadlines, the reports, the quotas. Each element is designed to extract the maximum labor while suppressing thought, creativity, and independence. Your time is parceled into units that can be sold and measured, but the value you create exceeds by far the compensation you receive. The surplus labor performed beyond what is necessary for your subsistence is the lifeblood of the capitalist class. Every moment you spend without reflection, without resistance, enriches those who neither bleed nor sweat, who have never faced the physical or mental toll of your work. Your time, once spent in toil, cannot be reclaimed. It is lost to the machine, to the accumulation of capital, to the perpetuation of a system designed to make you dependent and obedient. And yet the system does more than simply take your time. It controls your perception of it. You are taught to view labor as virtuous, to accept exhaustion as a badge of honor, to equate productivity with moral worth. Hours spent in idleness, in reflection, or in solidarity with fellow workers are derided, dismissed, or ignored. Time that is not monetized is considered wasted, and you internalize this judgment. The ideology of capitalism penetrates not only your work but your consciousness, making you complicit in the theft of your own hours. You measure your life in productivity, in output, in measurable results that serve the interests of others, and you fail to see that in this measurement your freedom is being steadily eroded. Yet there is a paradox in this domination. The very time that is taken from you, the very hours that the system claims, can become the basis for awakening. Each day of labor reveals the imbalance, the theft, the alienation. Awareness of this exploitation is the first step toward reclaiming your life, your hours, and your dignity. The system survives because it assumes your submission, your unthinking compliance, your acceptance that time is a commodity to be sold rather than a gift to be lived. Once the worker recognizes the value of their own hours and refuses to surrender them without resistance, the foundation of capitalist control begins to tremble. Your time is your life, and the life of the worker is inseparable from the act of labor. To surrender hours to a system that does not recognize your humanity is to surrender a portion of yourself. To recognize the theft is to arm oneself with knowledge, to awaken to the truth of exploitation, and to prepare for the collective action that alone can reclaim what is rightfully yours. Labor extracted without consent is theft, and the hours you live under capitalism are continuously appropriated unless you organize, resist, and demand that the products of your labor and the time that produces them belong to you. The system is strong, but only because your submission makes it so, and the power to reclaim your time lies in your unity, your awareness, and your refusal to continue as mere instruments of production. Comrades, understand this truth. Alienation is the condition that capitalism imposes upon the working class, the invisible chain that binds you to labor while separating you from the fruits of your effort, from the act of creation itself, and most importantly, from each other. This alienation is not an accident, nor a natural state of human existence. It is a deliberate structure of exploitation, designed to fragment and weaken the very class whose power could overthrow the system. You labor day after day, producing goods, generating wealth, sustaining industries, yet you do not possess the product of your labor. The objects you craft, the knowledge you apply, the energy you expend are immediately appropriated by those who own the means of production, transformed into commodities, and converted into profit for the few while the many remain dependent and impoverished. This separation the worker from the product, from the process, and from their fellow laborers is the essence of capitalist oppression, and it is relentless. Consider the alienation of the laborer from the product of their work. You invest hours, energy, and intellect into creation, yet the object or service you produce is no longer yours. It becomes a tool for the enrichment of others, a symbol of your exploitation, and a reminder that the labor you give life to belongs to someone else. The workers' labor power, the very manifestation of their effort, is converted into surplus value that is extracted by the capitalist class. The sense of ownership, of pride, of accomplishment is systematically denied, leaving the worker estranged not only from the object they produce but from the satisfaction of their own creativity. The laborer becomes a stranger in their own work, an instrument whose purpose is dictated externally, whose achievements are claimed by another, and whose individuality is subsumed under the demands of profit. Yet the separation extends beyond the products themselves. The worker is alienated from the labor process, from the act of creation. Work is no longer an expression of human creativity, intelligence, and agency. It is a series of repetitive motions, a set of tasks designed to meet quotas and deadlines, to maximize efficiency and productivity for the owner of capital. The worker's mind and body are subordinated to the machine, to the production line, to the market. Every gesture, every thought, every action is measured in terms of economic value rather than human fulfillment. In this way, the very act of labor, which could be a source of pride, joy, and self-realization, is transformed into a mechanism of subjugation. The worker's skill is reduced to a tool, their knowledge to a commodity, their energy to an instrument for the enrichment of another class. The third and perhaps most dangerous aspect of alienation is the separation from each other. Capitalism thrives on division, on the isolation of individuals, on turning fellow workers into competitors, rivals, or strangers. Solidarity is discouraged, collective consciousness is suppressed, and communal bonds are fragmented. The worker is taught to focus on survival, on wages, on advancement within the hierarchy, rather than on unity with those who share the same condition. In isolation, alienation becomes a prison, but in connection it becomes the seed of revolution. When workers recognize that their oppression is shared, that their alienation is a systemic condition rather than a personal failure, the potential for collective awakening emerges. The very force that divides the working class is also the key to its liberation, for awareness of shared exploitation is the first step toward organized action. Thus alienation carries within it both oppression and potential. While it fractures, isolates, and diminishes, it also exposes the truth of the system, revealing the structural injustice that governs society. The worker who experiences alienation begins to see the patterns of exploitation, the mechanisms of control, and the lies that justify inequality. This awareness, when nurtured, develops into class consciousness, the recognition that liberation is not found in individual effort, in personal ambition, or in incremental reform, but in collective action aimed at seizing control of the means of production and reclaiming the products of human labor. Alienation, therefore, is both the manifestation of capitalist oppression and the doorway to revolutionary possibility, for it is through recognition of separation that the workers can unite, organize, and act to transform society. Every moment of estrangement from one's labor, every task performed without ownership or joy, every alienated encounter with fellow workers carries within it the lesson of systemic exploitation. To understand this alienation is to grasp the power that lies dormant in the collective, to see that liberation is not theoretical but practical, not abstract but achievable through solidarity, struggle, and the conscious mobilization of the class. It is only by confronting this alienation, by refusing to accept it as natural, and by turning awareness into organized force, that the working class can transform the conditions of oppression into the instruments of its own emancipation. Comrades, observe how the system wields not only material power but also the power of thought, shaping your perception, your beliefs, and your very understanding of what is possible. Ideology is the silent hand that guides your submission, the invisible architecture of control that convinces you to accept exploitation as natural, inequality as inevitable, and hierarchy as deserved. The ruling class does not rely solely on force to maintain its dominion. It relies on ideas, on narratives, on the institutions that teach you to consent to your own oppression. Culture, politics, religion, and media are not neutral arenas of expression. They are instruments of domination, designed to produce obedience, to instill fear of rebellion, and to normalize the conditions that benefit the few at the expense of the many. The stories you are told, the values you are encouraged to hold, the frameworks through which you interpret reality, all of these are meticulously crafted to ensure that the system survives without resistance. Consider culture, the so-called realm of art, literature, and tradition. Culture is presented as a reflection of society, yet under capitalism it functions primarily as a mirror for the ruling class. It tells you what to admire, what to aspire to, what to fear. It valorizes wealth, glorifies individualism, and presents social mobility as evidence that the system is fair. It teaches you to idolize those who exploit you, to internalize their successes as proof of merit, and to accept poverty as a personal failing rather than a structural outcome. Through culture, the system seduces the worker into complicity, creating illusions of choice, aspiration, and achievement that obscure the reality of exploitation. What appears as entertainment, inspiration, or tradition is often an ideological tool, a method to instill values that align with the interests of the powerful. Politics, too, functions as ideology. You are taught that participation in elections, debates, and civic rituals constitutes freedom. Yet these mechanisms operate within a framework that preserves inequality. Political campaigns promise change, reform, or progress, but the boundaries of what is imaginable are constrained by the needs of capital. Laws, regulations, and policy are presented as neutral arbiters of justice, yet they systematically protect property, privilege, and accumulation, while framing dissent as disorder. The worker is invited to debate, to vote, and to express opinion, yet within parameters defined by the system itself. In this way, politics becomes a method of controlling consciousness, of channeling discontent into safe avenues, and of convincing the oppressed that their liberation is contingent on participation in a system that is designed to exploit them. Media, the instrument of information and communication, is perhaps the most pervasive and insidious tool of ideological control. Through news, advertising, social platforms, and popular narratives, the system shapes what you consider important, normal, or true. It defines your fears, your desires, and your understanding of morality. The media amplifies the voice of the powerful while marginalizing dissent, framing inequality as inevitable, competition as virtuous, and solidarity as impractical or naive. It presents consumption as freedom, wealth as virtue, and labor as necessity, conditioning the mind to accept economic coercion as natural law. The worker internalizes these messages, reproduces them, and policies their own behavior in accordance with them, all while the structures of exploitation remain unchallenged. Religion, education, and other social institutions further reinforce ideological control. They often teach obedience, submission, and moral justification for existing hierarchies, presenting suffering as virtuous, patience as necessary, and revolt as sinful. Even knowledge itself can be appropriated, organized, and presented in ways that obscure systemic inequality, emphasizing individual achievement while ignoring the social conditions that enable or constrain it. The entire apparatus of ideology functions to produce not only compliance but self-complicity. You are not merely dominated from above, you are led to participate in your own domination, to internalize it, and to propagate it in thought, speech, and action. Yet, ideology, like alienation, carries the seeds of potential liberation. To recognize that culture, politics, and media are instruments of control is to pierce the veil of consent, to see that the inequalities you endure are neither natural nor inevitable, but imposed. Awareness of ideological manipulation opens the door to consciousness, and consciousness, when shared, becomes a weapon of collective power. Once the worker understands the mechanisms of domination, the false narratives, and the constructed norms, they are no longer passive. They begin to question, to educate, to organize, and to resist. The same ideas that once constrained thought can be replaced with new ideas of solidarity, equality, and collective action, allowing the working class to reclaim agency, disrupt the narratives of the ruling class, and mobilize for emancipation. Ideology enforces submission, yet in understanding its operation, the oppressed discover the tools for liberation, the frameworks for unity, and the pathways to revolutionary consciousness. Recognizing manipulation is not an end in itself. It is the first step in the collective struggle to seize control of society, to dismantle structures of exploitation, and to assert the power of the many over the few. Comrades, the most dangerous force to the system is not the isolated worker, not the dissatisfied individual, but the worker who recognizes their power in the collective. The ruling class depends upon division, upon the fragmentation of labor, upon the belief that each must struggle alone, that each must compete for survival, that solidarity is impossible. They fear above all the organized unity of the oppressed, because when the working class comes together, their strength is undeniable, their capacity for transformation is limitless, and the foundations of capitalism tremble under the weight of collective resolve. Collective consciousness is revolutionary because it converts awareness into action, despair into purpose, and alienation into solidarity. Without it, knowledge of exploitation remains impotent, discontent remains fragmented, and potential power dissipates in isolation. Understand, comrades, that consciousness alone is insufficient. To recognize oppression is to glimpse freedom, but without organization, insight is wasted. The worker may feel injustice, may resent inequality, may perceive the theft of their labor, yet remain powerless if they act alone, dispersed, and uncoordinated. Capitalism is designed to exploit precisely this isolation, to pit worker against worker, to promote rivalry and mistrust. It encourages the illusion of scarcity, the fear of displacement, and the pursuit of individual advancement at the expense of communal well-being. Only by transcending this imposed division, by uniting under shared understanding, can the working class convert latent potential into a revolutionary force capable of confronting the structures that dominate and exploit them. Collective consciousness arises when workers understand that their oppression is shared, systemic, and not a result of personal failure. It is the recognition that the wealth they produce, the labor they perform, and the time they surrender daily are appropriated by the few, not because of natural order or merit, but because the system enforces it. This awareness dissolves the illusions of competition and isolation. It replaces fear with understanding, confusion with clarity, and passivity with the knowledge that power exists, not in isolated struggle, but in the unity of the many. Once consciousness is shared, it becomes a guiding principle for action, a framework for strategy, and a foundation for organized resistance. Organization is the mechanism by which consciousness becomes effective. It is not enough to feel injustice or to articulate it verbally. Action must be coordinated, deliberate, and sustained. Through unions, committees, councils, and assemblies, the working class transforms scattered discontent into collective strategy. Every strike, every protest, every demand for rights, and every coordinated refusal to work under exploited conditions is an expression of this collective consciousness. The very act of organizing educates, unites, and empowers. Workers learn to see beyond the immediate tasks of their labor, to understand the broader social, economic, and political structures that govern their lives, and to act in concert to challenge them. Organization transforms numbers into strength, ideas into strategy, and resistance into revolution. Comrades, the ruling class maintains its dominance not only through force but through the perception of inevitability. They rely upon the belief that rebellion is impossible, that workers are too fragmented, too distracted, too disorganized to resist effectively. Yet history demonstrates the opposite. Revolutions, uprisings, and collective struggles succeed when workers recognize their shared condition and act together. The strength of the capitalist class is contingent upon the weakness of the workers. Unity. Where the workers are divided, the system flourishes. Where they are united, it trembles. Every factory, every office, every field, every neighborhood where solidarity emerges becomes a battlefield in the class struggle, a site where consciousness and organization challenge domination and lay the groundwork for systemic transformation. The potential of collective consciousness is not merely defensive, it is proactive. It does not merely respond to exploitation, it reshapes society. When workers organize, they assert control over production, over time, and over the allocation of resources. They demand equality, fairness, and recognition of their labor as the source of all wealth. The unity of the oppressed transforms alienation into empowerment, isolation into fraternity, and knowledge into strategic force. This consciousness is inherently revolutionary because it recognizes that no reform, no compromise, no concession can achieve true emancipation without collective action. And only when the many act together, consciously and deliberately, can the structures of domination be dismantled and replaced with systems that reflect justice, equality, and shared control. Collective consciousness is the lifeblood of revolution. It bridges the gap between awareness and action, between frustration and power. It allows the working class to see beyond the immediate suffering imposed by the system to the broader possibilities of social transformation. It makes visible the path from oppression to liberation and equips the workers with the understanding and the coordination necessary to seize control of society. Where consciousness is shared and organization is strong, the ruling class cannot survive. For the power of the united working class is absolute, and the promise of revolution becomes not a dream but a tangible, unstoppable force. Comrades, awareness alone is insufficient. To know that you are exploited, that your labor enriches another while your own needs remain unmet, is only the beginning. Knowledge must become action, thought must become struggle, and consciousness must be transformed into organized force if liberation is to be achieved. The system depends upon the inertia of the oppressed, upon the endless recognition of injustice without the corresponding effort to resist it. Capitalism survives because the many do not act collectively to reclaim what is theirs, their time, their labor, their creativity, and the wealth they produce. To remain passive in the face of exploitation is to consent to it, to hand over one's life and the fruits of one's effort to those who have no stake in justice, humanity, or equality. The reclamation of power begins with the recognition that your labor is not merely a contribution to society, but the foundation of society itself. The machines, the factories, the offices, the farms all exist because of the work you perform. Without your energy, knowledge, and time, production ceases, profits vanish, and the illusion of capitalist authority collapses. Yet this recognition must not remain abstract, must translate into deliberate, organized action. Strikes, occupations, collective bargaining, and coordinated refusal to participate in exploitative systems are not merely symbolic, they are expressions of the workers' power. Every refusal to labor under oppression, every act of solidarity, every coordinated challenge to the existing order is a step toward reclaiming control over society, transforming alienation into empowerment, and turning potential energy into revolutionary force. Action must also be strategic. Awareness guides purpose, but organization channels it. The worker who simply resists individually may achieve temporary relief, but the collective struggle is what changes society. Unity transforms numbers into strength, ideas into tactics, and discontent into revolution. The streets, the workplaces, and the fields become arenas of struggle, each a battlefield in the war between exploitation and liberation. Through coordinated effort, workers can seize not only temporary concessions but long-term control over the instruments of production, the distribution of wealth, and the structures of governance. This is the path to true emancipation, the only way to dismantle the systemic inequalities that have endured for generations. Comrades, consider the power inherent in organized action. A single worker may be overpowered, silenced, or dismissed, but a united workforce cannot be ignored. The ruling class may attempt to divide, to coerce, to suppress, but the collective will of the many, acting with consciousness and discipline, is unstoppable. Every strike that halts production, every refusal that challenges authority, every organized effort to redistribute control over labor and resources strikes directly at the foundation of exploitation. The strength of the system is not infinite. It is maintained through consent, through the complicity of those it oppresses. Withdraw that consent through organized struggle, and the power that seems unassailable crumbles. Action must be relentless, deliberate, and uncompromising. Capitalism thrives on incrementalism, on distraction, on the acceptance of partial remedies that leave the structure of exploitation intact. To seize power, workers must act with clarity of purpose and understanding of systemic mechanisms. Rebellion must be planned, coordinated, and sustained. It must target the centers of wealth and control while building structures that ensure the fruits of labor return to those who create them. Through action, theory becomes reality, consciousness becomes force, and potential is converted into tangible control. It is not enough to recognize injustice. One must disrupt it, dismantle it, and replace it with a system where labor, time, and wealth belong to those who produce them. Action is also transformative on the human level. Through struggle, workers reclaim dignity, self-respect, and the understanding that their lives are not commodities to be bought and sold, but expressions of creativity, intelligence, and humanity. Each organized effort strengthens the bonds of solidarity, nurtures collective consciousness, and builds the capacity for further resistance. It is through action that alienation is overcome, ideology is challenged, and the structures of domination are exposed and dismantled. Every act of struggle reinforces the truth that power does not reside solely in the hands of the few, but in the unity, knowledge, and determination of the many. Comrades, the path from awareness to emancipation is clear. Knowledge must ignite struggle, consciousness must drive organization, and unity must transform into force. The worker who recognizes their exploitation but does not act remains captive. The worker who acts collectively and consciously begins to reclaim life itself. Labour, wealth and society are not gifts to be received. They are created, sustained and controlled by those who toil. Only through organised, deliberate and relentless action can the working class seize control, reshape the structures of society and transform oppression into liberation. Action is not optional, it is the instrument of revolution, the mechanism by which awareness becomes power, and the means through which the oppressed can finally reclaim what is theirs. Comrades, we've traced the chains that bind us, our time stolen, our labour exploited, our minds shaped to accept inequality, our solidarity fractured. We have seen how alienation separates us from our work, our products, and from one another, and how ideology enforces our submission, convincing us that this oppression is natural, deserved, and immutable. Yet in every thread of this system lies the potential for its undoing, in every act of awareness the seed of rebellion, and in every shared understanding the spark of collective power. The truth is undeniable. The structures that dominate our lives exist only because we allow them to, only because we accept division, distraction, and passivity. But the same labour that builds their wealth, the same time they seize, and the same knowledge they attempt to control can be wielded by us to reclaim society itself. Awareness must become action, and action must be united, deliberate, and revolutionary. The power of the many is greater than the power of the few, and when the working class recognizes itself, organizes itself, and moves together, no force can withstand its will. We must seize the hours stolen from us, claim the fruits of our labour, and dismantle the systems of exploitation that have long profited from our obedience. Solidarity is our weapon, consciousness is our guide, and organized struggle is our path. The time for doubt, for hesitation, and for divided action is past. The working class has the knowledge, the strength, and the capacity to reshape the world. Our labour is not a commodity to enrich the few, it is the foundation upon which all society rests, and it is the instrument through which we reclaim our destiny. Let us rise together, comrades, united in purpose, unwavering in resolve, and relentless in action. Let us transform alienation into solidarity, ideology into awareness, and awareness into organized struggle. The system fears our unity, the ruling class fears our consciousness, and history will bend to those who refuse to be passive. We are not destined to endure. We are destined to act, to seize control of our lives, our labour, and our world. The choice is ours, and the hour is now. Comrades, reclaim your time, reclaim your labour, reclaim your power, and let the working class rise to forge a society of justice, equality, and freedom.